everybody, and welcome to the Spoiler Warning Podcast. This is review number 734 with a review of Beau Is Afraid. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week in the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a theater near you. This week, we are gathering to talk about the latest film from Ari Aster. We have had a storied history on this podcast of our time with the two films that previously existed from Ari Aster, Hereditary and Midsommar. Love them or hate them, they're definitely very, very compelling films. I think when the trailer came out for this film, I had no idea what to think, but I was definitely curious what we were about to get into. We're going to find out in a few short moments whether it lived up to or was anything we could have imagined it was going to be. But we'll just talk real briefly for anybody who hasn't been with us as long as those episodes have existed. Let's just talk about our history with Hereditary and Midsommar. Stephen, why don't you start us off and let us know what you thought of those two films?
Yeah, so I am famously on this podcast a wuss when it comes to horror movies. I don't like them. I don't want to see them. When Hereditary came out, what I heard about it from everyone was, this is going to scare the shit out of you. Oh my God. The things in the background during scenes moving around in the shadows, you are going to lose your mind. And so I did not watch it. I refused to watch it until Midsommar was coming out. And you convinced me to do a double feature review where I watched both of them. And so I inoculated myself from the terror. I watched Hereditary on like a Saturday afternoon with all the lights on in my apartment, like just doing everything I could to not be afraid of it. And it worked. Like, I wasn't afraid, but I thought it was really well done. Like, I thought as a psychological horror, something that clearly is interested in other themes about like inherited trauma and grief and the way like families can kind of drag each other down and everything. I thought the movie had a lot going on, and I thought it was extremely well done. I thought the way Ari Aster moved his camera around in this house, right? He always finds these interesting spaces to like move around in the scene. Beau Is Afraid also has some of these too. But the house in Hereditary, it was just so cool and interesting. And I enjoyed it, even though, again, I hate being scared and I did not let it scare me. So I kind of broke the movie, but I liked what I saw anyway. And Midsommar, I have not revisited our review, but in my memory, it was 100% my jam, because it was like, this is going to be creepy and disturbing, but as an obvious metaphor for a toxic relationship and how it feels to be stuck in a kind of gaslighty, toxic relationship. And I thought as a kind of like deconstruction of that, or just this like an artist just like taking that idea and then turning it into just the most like gruesome and beautiful visuals on the screen. I thought it was just a really incredible movie. And again, the camera work was just so interesting. He has that scene of the road upside down. He has just these like amazing moments. Both of them made me think Ari Aster is a man to watch. I don't know if it's Aster or Aster, by the way. I just keep going back and forth.
Yeah, I never know, so I'm not going to complain.
Yeah, I thought, I'm going to say Aster. Ari Aster, he clearly has a vision. He knows his way around a camera. He knows how to like project whatever subliminal themes are in his brain and make them into visual, disturbing concepts. And I really, really enjoyed that. So in my head, if he ever was willing to get out of this horror thing, I bet I would like this guy a lot. And when Beau Is Afraid was coming around, I was getting my wish. So I was pretty excited, even when reviews started trickling in. How about you?
Yeah, when Hereditary came out, it looked interesting, and I think I went into it just kind of being like, okay, this film looks cool, and I think it kind of, it blew me away. There's still one section in the middle of that film which is like one of the most compelling things I've seen. The way to portray what a certain character's feeling in this moment, brilliant. Everything about that film really drew me in. I just double checked, and it was my number 5 film of the year it came out. So like, obviously, huge fan. When Midsommar came out, I was like, oh, I'm so excited to see what's next. Let's see what Ari Aster has to go on. I'm so excited to see what comes next. And what I remembered is that I did not care for that second film. Something about like, I liked the ideas it was going for, but it was maybe just a little too weird, and some of the things that were happening in that story felt like they were there for weirdness sake and not really like there wasn't like to me, it just didn't feel like there was a cohesive thing. So, and all I really remember about it is like, the last shot, a few other choice shots from the film, the eyebrows guy.
The like group of crying women joining her, I think, is such a memorable shot. I think about that all the time.
Yeah. But like, I remember that I didn't like it, and then I pulled up the review, and apparently I gave it a must avoid. So I really, really didn't like it. But I was still curious, new film coming out. Then I saw that trailer for it, and I was like, oh, now I am curious because I don't know what I am going to think about this film because, like, the trailer's weird, right? I mean, I feel like the trailer is potentially off-putting for a lot of people. Like, you watch this, you're like, what the fuck is this movie about? Why would I want to see this? I'm going in based on a track record of loving one film and hating a second film, and then now the third film, whatever. I'll go in optimistically and see what I get. And kind of all I really knew going in was that weird trailer that I saw and the 3-hour runtime, and We saw that film, Stephen. This is one of the rare chances that we were sat right next to each other in the theater.
Mm-hmm. Sure were.
I think we're going to get into it momentarily. Anything else you want to say before we dive in, Stephen?
I'm just very interested. I'm trying to remember the last time I've seen someone do the horror to non-horror pipeline before. I guess. Why am I blanking on The Witch? Robert Eggers.
Oh, yeah.
Is making that switch. But The Northman is not horror, but it is still like there are a lot of things that are very similar to his earlier two movies in that movie too, and it's still kind of like serious and violent and stuff. I want to see like Robert Eggers make a comedy. I want to see what happens when someone just does a full flip like this. Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely interesting to watch. But
also, Stephen, is this not horror? I mean, the title of the film is Beau Is Afraid.
It's something. This is a deconstructed horror, maybe. Even more, like, all of his movies are deconstructed in a sense, like they're very obviously about something else, but this is like, I am so about something else that the scary won't even be scary to you anymore. Maybe this is about scary. Yeah. It's about being afraid. I cracked it. No one who hadn't read the title would have ever thought of that.
All right, Stephen. I think it's about time to get into this. So we're going to play the trailer for everybody listening, and then we're going to come back and give you all a review.
I am so sorry for what your daddy passed down to you. But I wanted a child, the greatest gift of my life.
I'm visiting my mother tomorrow.
Hi, Carrot. It's Mom. I'm just calling to say that I'm so excited to see you tomorrow. You're my angel, and I love you. Okay. I love you. Okay, bye, sweetie. I love you.
Are you at the airport?
I'm on my way. It's not safe, is it? What do you think I should do?
I'm sure you'll do the right thing, sweetheart.
Welcome back.
I hit you with my car.
What?
I know.
What was this?
That's my little assistant health monitor. Feeling sad about going home, Beau? Must feel totally unreal.
I'm supposed to be leaving.
I don't know if that's gonna happen.
You will walk many miles. Dozens will become hundreds. Hundreds will become thousands. Your adventures will continue for years and years.
I just need to get home.
I know. Sweet devotion. It's not me. Just give me more.
you want the truth now?
All right, so that was the trailer for Beau Is Afraid. Basically, there's this character named Beau whose mother has recently passed away, and he needs to get from his place to his mother's house where a funeral is supposed to happen, and this is sort of the adventure he goes on. Real fast, as a word of warning, this is a hard film to talk about without at least spoiling themes and different things in this film. We're going to do our best to be very vague for as long as we can, but we might just suddenly break into spoilers within the next 10 minutes or something. So we'll do our best to sort of ad hoc throw out the spoiler warning. We'll see how it goes. But Stephen, why don't you start off by letting us know what you thought about Beau Is Afraid?
Overall, and it took some chewing on, I think I mostly really, really liked Beau Is Afraid. Here's what I'm going to say, and we're going to get into it. We even did what we never do and talked a little bit immediately after seeing the movie too. I think the first hour of this movie is like a masterpiece. I think it is so incredibly well done. It is funny, surreal. It's like a romp through anxiety, and especially the anxiety that would be fueled by someone who maybe watches too much Fox News. It's the story of a man who lives in a city, and the city is a wasteland. There are people stabbing each other left and right. People are firing AK-47s and selling them on the street. There are dangers everywhere you find in this grimy, terrifying place. There are drugs that if you take, you will die if you don't take a sip of water immediately after.
I know. Stephen, how seen did you feel by the always with water?
I felt so seen with not only the always with water, because I always carry water with me, but whenever I have to take a medication and I try to avoid them, I tend to be kind of I don't know, keep my stasis, don't screw anything up. I always am so worried about oh my God, did I accidentally take an extra dose? What did I wait 6 hours like I was supposed to? Am I supposed to have this with food? What if I don't have it with food? The way this represents that kind of anxiety, that we can assume there's no reality in this movie, but you can imagine the idea of the movie as a projection of anxiety, and the world is rising to meet the anxiety of Beau, the main character. And these are all the things that might keep you up at night. What happens if I end a conversation with my mom in not the best way? What is the worst thing that could happen next? And this whole movie is what is the worst thing that could happen? And we are watching the worst thing happen over and over and over. And that first hour or so, from Beau's apartment to the first place that he winds up with Amy Ryan, and I almost don't want to spoil that Nathan Lane is in this movie, but he's in the trailer, so it's not a spoiler. All of that, I think, is just phenomenal. And it is fantastic because Ari Aster is doing the thing that I think people are going to criticize the movie for. He's being self-indulgent. He is taking an idea, stream of consciousness, and just going I'm going to hit this fucking idea as hard as I can. And my hot take is that I think the flaws in this movie, where it loses steam, are when it isn't being indulgent enough. When it pauses and goes let me try to explain to the audience what I'm doing. Let me try to tell them. Let me think about whether they're following me or not. There is a beautiful looking scene in the middle of the movie where a play is taking place that goes on for too long, and the only reason I can think of it being there is to kind of hold the audience's hand and try to clue them in on what kind of story they're watching. There's another series of moments late in the movie where characters have direct conversations where they basically lay out facts that were already alluded to by the whole way the movie was made, and I feel whenever they talk about it, they're losing steam in what the movie's doing. So I think Ari Aster second-guessed himself a little bit, and I think he started to try to add things to sprinkle to the audience, and that is where it loses me a bit. But the energy of the movie, that first hour, and then there's so much even in the second and third hours of the movie too that I really loved, a lot of moments where I laughed out loud, or just the audacity of it really, really gripped me. I think there's too much here to love for me to be upset that it has moments that deflate and kind of try your patience. I think overall it is just such an interesting artistic expression made at a level and a budget with a cast that I just cannot imagine this ever happening again, ever. I walked away being like, my God, there were so many ideas packed into that movie. I would rather be overwhelmed with ideas than like see a movie like with not enough ideas, which we might also review after this, depending on how much time we have. Yeah, I'll say more, but this won't be a traditional review. So let's just like lob back and forth, and we can talk out the specific parts of the movie.
Yeah, that's fine. I think it's, like this is a film that I can't really in good conscience recommend to people technically. Mm-hmm. I had a lot of fun with parts of it. I thought, as you said, like the beginning of this film is incredibly entertaining. I was totally digging it. Some of those parts you alluded to in the middle that involve like more of a traditional journey and traditional storytelling, I guess, feel kind of out of place with the world that we've been watching, and it kind of feels like the entire film grounds to a halt so it can do this other thing that's like a different version of an artistic license that it's trying to take. And for me, none of that really seemed to work. And then we kind of dive back in as that sort of resolves, and we return to the film we were watching the first time, and then it just amps up a bunch of stuff. And I think that like there are a lot of really interesting ideas. I kind of wonder if this is a film that like Ari Aster is too young in his career to be making yet. Like it feels like this is the thing where like once you've made a bunch of other films and you're like far into your career, you can like make a film like this where it's just like you going all out doing your own thing.
This is his Fabelmans.
Yeah, no, like I was literally thinking, I was like this feels. I mean, not just because it's. It's taking everything he's built before and then coming here, but also because it feels grounded in some sort of truth. I don't know what part that truth is, but
it's also it's the truth of a Jewish director's complicated relationship with their mother.
Yes. And it's like, okay, this feels like not necessarily self-indulgent in a bad way, but it just feels like you already went here? Like you spent this now? Like what are you going to do 3 films from now? You've already done this thing. It's like, now are you going to like, I just don't know where you're supposed to go from here. But I think one of the things that I don't necessarily love about the film is it kind of feels like there's so many ideas that are being drawn together that it's hard to see one narrative through point. Like, is this a film purely about fear and anxiety about the world? Is it purely about guilt? Is it purely about, maybe helicopter parenting, conservative upbringing? Like there's a bunch of things that all feel like this entire film could be just that one thing. And instead it's so many different things. And I think it's not necessarily one thought. It's all the thoughts all at the same time. And I kind of like it. Part of this is my problem, right? Like I'm watching the film trying to figure out what it's really about instead of just completely enjoying it. And I'm like, holy shit. There was one moment where for a split second, I thought this was the Truman Show. And like, we'll get to it when we're in like full blown spoilers, but I was like, what the fuck? There's no way that's where they're going with this. And in spoilers, we'll talk about whether or not they did. But I was just very, very curious as every little turn happened in the story, kind of going like, are you just doing this because this is the thing that seems the most interesting in the moment? Or are you doing this because this is the idea you had from the start? And I couldn't tell whether he was making it up as he was going along or whether he had one cohesive narrative he was trying to tell about Beau and, whoever Beau is supposed to represent, whether or not it's him.
Yeah, I get that. I think the unifying theory, because I was thinking about this too, and you and I talked a bit before, because I think the beginning of the movie could easily be understood as a kind of social commentary, right? There's a version of the first 30 minutes or hour of this movie that are a absolute takedown of the state of fear and fear of your fellow man that like the media, especially right-wing media, is trying to instill in people. And it is kind of like the vision of New York that Tucker Carlson wants us to believe in, right? Is like what this movie is filming in a way that is very, very, very funny and also has like those little kernels of real experiences that it's drawing on, where if you have lived in a city, you'll kind of see what he's doing and then heightening to a ridiculous degree in a way that is very funny and also terrifying. And so there's a version of this that is like broad social commentary, but look at the movie as a whole. What I think it is about the evolution of anxiety. And it starts with anxiety as an outward pointing thing of what bad things can happen to me. And over time, it becomes like anxiety about the people in your life, your relationships, the friends, the people who are taking care of you, the people you meet, the people you might be in love with. And then it ends with inward anxiety of what if I am a horrible person? You know, what if deep down I am just terrible and I'm doomed forever? And I think if you think of the movie as like one journey through anxiety from like that outward thing to the inward direction, it does kind of plot a very clean trajectory. I'm sure there are zigs and zags, but it mostly seems to follow that formula. And I think the outward part resonates closer with me because it feels like a social commentary. Like we all live a life where people are anxious about each other and have unfounded fears and things like that. The more it goes inward, the more it is inward to this very specific character. And so there are things that resonate, but it feels more like a Ari Aster therapy session, which I like. Like, I love me a movie that is a therapy session, but it does make it feel like a different movie, even though I think it is actually about one thing the whole way through.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's like when we were walking out of the theater, I asked you, I was like, so does it seem like maybe Ari Aster's mom didn't really like Hereditary? Because on some level, it feels like this film is a reaction or a conversation about maybe the depiction of way he is traditionally portrayed motherhood in previous films.
Well, and that is 100%. Like, honestly, watching this movie made me see even more the connections between his previous two movies, not only because the movie is calling them out with visual gags and things like that, but like the relationship between mother and child, you know, being haunted by Toni Collette, like spoilers for Hereditary, but quite literally, like that. The subtext of that seems very clear watching this movie, but also Midsommar begins with Florence Pugh's parents have died in a tragic accident, and I believe she wasn't picking up her phone, right, because she was with her boyfriend, if I'm remembering right about how the movie works. And at the time, I thought, like, oh, wow, what an interesting exploration of, like, the completely irrational guilt someone might feel. Watching Beau Is Afraid, I'm like, oh, this is like you playing out your deepest anxiety of like, what would happen if I didn't pick up the phone? You know, why do I need to be the perfect kid all the time? And it does, in a way, this pairs so closely with the beginning of Midsommar, where this is just like, we're going to explore what happens if you don't pick up the phone. It is very, very interesting. There are also visual homages to his previous movies that, again, it makes a point of doing. Like, one of my favorite scenes is in that first hour masterpiece section. He is in a bathtub and there's dripping, and he suddenly looks up and there is a sweating man holding himself up on the like walls, trying not to fall. Which, if I remember right, in Hereditary, the exact same thing happens with like demonic Toni Collette or something like that is on the ceiling. Like the exact same thing. I would say someone losing a head in a tragic freak accident is certainly something that he has explored before. There's a scene that is like the closest to like the scary movie version of Midsommar here, where people are literally like on top of a similar high place and then jumping and dying on a rock. There are things where he's playing with his visuals in that kind of Fabelman's way, where you could argue he is acting like he's more famous than he is. And like, you're right. There's a version where it's like, dude, you should probably wait until movie number 10 to do this when you've built up enough cred that everyone will delight in your references. But I don't know. I delighted in it anyway. Yeah,
especially if you're planning on doing a film that might not make people want to give you money to do another film. You want to save that till you've done a few for them, and then you could do one for you.
Yeah. How did you feel the audience in our theater was experiencing this movie?
I mean, the funny thing about, like, you know, I already mentioned that this is like one of the rare times that you and I were sitting together in a theater, but also due to the nature of Theater 5 at the Alamo Drafthouse and the seats that we chose, we were a little bit just isolated, just us. We had our nice little cozy corner for this film. And like, there was definitely laughs around us, but I feel like I could only hear us laughing during most of the film.
Yeah, I felt that too. I felt some people talking around me. I was trying to zone in on only focus on the movie, but I felt like people were getting a little bit bored. So I don't know if even an Alamo audience was getting bored by it. I have a feeling general audiences are not going to be vibing on this movie too much. Well, but I don't know. I was like, the way people talked about it, I thought it was going to be some kind of excruciatingly like trying your patience and being aggressively unpleasant most of the time. Like, there are aggressively unpleasant movies I like Her Smell, right? It is a thing where Alex Ross Perry like tries to be aggressively unpleasant for the first like 45 minutes of the movie. Beau Is Afraid is not that at all. Like, I do not think this movie is aggressively unpleasant ever. I think it plays like a fun crowd pleaser that just goes on and on and on and on and gets weirder and weirder in a way that will confuse people, but I don't see people being like, I hate it, I'm so angry. I'm kind of surprised that that's the reputation that it got.
Yeah, well, if you define I hate it, I'm angry as aggressively unpleasant, then sure. But I might argue that some of the play stuff is aggressively unpleasant.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't hate it. I mostly was just like, ugh.
Yeah. I love like the cast he managed to pull in this movie. Like, Joaquin Phoenix is obviously great. I will watch him do literally anything until inevitably it comes out that he's some terrible person in a few years, and then I retroactively cancel him. But for now, in this pre-cancellation time, I will watch him do anything. But the side characters, like Parker Posey, I feel like I haven't seen her in anything in a long time. It was fun getting to see her. Stephen McKinley Henderson as the therapist. He's just like such a great character actor whenever he pops up in anything. And I feel like he's used to a really good kind of not inverting his character, but they take him to some places that make it extra funny that he is who he is. I will always laugh whenever Richard Kind shows up in a movie about Jewish guilt, which is all of them, as far as I can tell. He's just so good in that role. And Nathan Lane, like, he's such a silly kind of foppish character to be here, and I had a ball watching him. Every time he is like flipping burgers and being the dad who's trying to keep everything cheery even though things are not actually cheery, like, I was cracking. I loved him in this movie.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. Like, all that stuff was fun. Like, there's so much fun stuff in this film. It is just really out there though, and I enjoyed a lot of it. I enjoy a lot of the themes too, which we will start to get to shortly. But I still don't know who this film is for, and I don't know, like, I don't know what any individual person walking into this theater will think about this. It's hard to go like, look, just give it a chance, and by the end you'll really, really love it. It's like, I don't know. Like, I can't tell anybody to go see it because they might just never listen to it. I have to say again after they leave the theater, and it's weird. This is going to be either a film that you're going to love, or you're going to be like, what the fuck did I just watch? That did not work for me at all. And I don't know. I don't think there's going to be a lot of middle ground for this film.
What I will say is I think you should see it in theaters if you were going to see it, because I can imagine at home with a phone within arm's reach or something, there will be moments where you're like, yeah, I'm watching, and then you start scrolling or doing something else. And I think this is a movie that you need to be held hostage by it, for better or worse. I think it just is going to play a lot better in that scenario.
Do you think an audience could ruin it for you though? Like, if you had a bad audience who was really not liking it and decided to make sure everybody knows that they don't like it, I feel like it could go both ways. It could either heighten your enjoyment or just kill it based on other people not vibing with it in real time.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I almost think an audience like yucking the whole time would annoy me more than an audience silently not liking it. Because like, this movie is definitely funny, But it is like a tragic comedy that is also exploring neuroses and like deep-seated fears and stuff like that. And I think there's a version of the like Cocaine Bear audience just roaring with laughter at the movie that would annoy me more. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if unless they were like booing at the screen, but I've never been in been in a situation where that actually happened. I think you should go alone or with someone who you either think will enjoy it or whose opinion you don't care about. I think if I were going with like my wife and I could feel her not liking it, it would maybe ruin the movie for me.
Yeah, this is not a date movie at all. Like,
no.
Like, you know, very specific couples, maybe it is. I think that, I think that feeling of, oh my God, what did I drag them to, is going to be the thing that could destroy this film for you, where you can't even feel it in real time because you're just like every little thing that you're, you know, it's the date equivalent of the theme of this. Every worst possible outcome is happening right now.
Right.
You're like, oh my God, there's still 3 hours left.
The thought experiment is, I think that first, like, again, I think the first hour or 90 minutes is incredible, but I'm going to say first 30 minutes for the like unambiguous, this is like the city anxiety being heightened and put on screen. I think anyone is going to love that. Like, I'm actually shocked if any date that you bring on this movie isn't having a blast with that part, unless they're like getting offended on behalf of someone or what. I don't know. Like, I guess there's a version where you read it in the worst faith imaginable and then get upset by it. But I just think there's so much hilarious here. It builds way more goodwill than I would have ever expected from the kind of word I was hearing coming out of theaters when it first started screening. But yeah, maybe don't bring a date to this one. Are we diving into quick spoilers and then diving into verdicts and then doing some spoilers? Yeah,
let's go ahead and do our verdicts, and then just we're full blown spoilers from then on out. So Stephen Miller, if you're going to give us a must see, recommend with a caveat, wait for until pass with a caveat, or a must avoid, what would you give it?
Man, I try to remember how I scale my ratings usually, because I believe this should be a recommend with a caveat, because there are big caveats, like, obviously. And I also don't think it is a perfect movie. Like, I see things that feel sanded down, bloated, areas that I wish he had done it differently. But then, like, the feeling I have just knowing this movie exists is like a must-see feeling. I'm going to say recommend with a caveat, because, again, if this were executed flawlessly, I would say screw the fact that 95% of people are going to hate it, must see. But because it is not executed flawlessly, even if you love it, I think you're going to have things that frustrate you a little bit. And just know that going in, you are watching a big, messy, extremely entertaining thing with 100 ideas. And I think it should have cut down a few of the weaker ideas and committed more wholeheartedly to the rest. My summary, my elevator pitch is, this is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou if Charlie Kaufman directed it, but not like early Charlie Kaufman, more like the last act of I'm Thinking of Ending Things, Charlie Kaufman. And if that attracts you, then you should definitely watch this movie. If that terrifies you, then maybe you should not watch this movie.
Yeah, I definitely like this more than I liked I'm Thinking of Ending Things. I will say that. I already said at the beginning of when we started talking here in this episode that, like, I can't good conscience recommend this to anybody, but rating system be damned, I have to say recommend with a caveat, because that's the feeling I had minus that middle section of the film, even though I'm like, the caveat is that I don't actually recommend it to anybody.
I am flabbergasted. I was so sure you were going past with a caveat. I had no idea you were anywhere near recommend with a caveat.
The beginning is genuinely great. The ending is genuinely great. That middle section, I could, like, I told you when we were standing outside of the theater that I could do a fan edit of that film where I completely take out that section and show it to somebody who's never seen the film, and they would not feel like anything's missing. Earlier in this review, you mentioned that, like, you feel like he has this great thing going, and then he feels like he needs to, like, explain to the audience what he's doing. I don't feel like he is catering to anybody. I think he really wants that stuff to be in there for reasons that I don't understand, because you don't overstuff. You don't make your film 3 hours because you're worried the audience isn't vibing with the other hour of work that you did. You know what I mean? Like that's counterproductive. Like you pare it down to like the essential bits and then say like, I trust the audience to get it. The fact that he went for 3 hours means that he thought all of that was important to the story he was trying to tell. And I don't feel like it was pandering. I feel like it was like, no, this is my masterpiece.
Interesting. See, I'm not saying he put that in because he didn't think the audience was vibing, but I think some of those choices are the equivalent of being like, oh, do you get it? Do you get it? Let me explain to you. Just let me make sure that you get it, which is arrogant in its own way, because it's saying like, it's so important that you understand this that I'm going to lay it out for you. But I feel like it comes from a lack of trust in the audience. And maybe he just loves it, right? Like he clearly loves the visual aesthetic of that middle section. And honestly, I love the visual aesthetic too. I just don't think it justifies the duration of that part. But yeah, beyond the things he loves, I don't know. There are just times where I felt him like not going as hard as he wants. And in spoilers, I might surprise you with some things that I think do not go as hard as they should have gone, including a visit from a friend we may have seen in Man Seeking Woman.
I did think of a specific
Tanaka.
character. Tanaka. All right, Stephen, for people who aren't going to stick around for spoilers, should we say goodbye to them?
Yeah, I mean, you should always say goodbye. You never know when a chandelier might do something that you don't want it to do. You can find me at twitter.com/SDavidMiller or SDavidMiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or Twitter.com/ChristopherIRL. You can find the podcast over at SpoilerWarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so on Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at Twitter.com/SpoilerWarning, Facebook.com/TheSpoilerWarning, or Instagram.com/TheSpoilerWarning. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from a track selected from artlist.io, so hopefully you're enjoying that. And yeah, as we said at the top, this film requires spoilers to really dive into, so that's what we're about to offer you. So if you haven't seen the film, maybe go see it and then come back and listen to this segment. Or, who knows, just stick around and listen to what we have to say, because this is going to be like the actual diving in and talking about the themes and what the fuck we think is going on in this film. And yeah, so that music's going to fade up. When it fades out, we'll be in full-blown spoilers, so hold on to your head. All right, we are back. This is spoiler territory. It's the after part of our review of Beau Is Afraid. We are talking full-blown spoilers for the film. Steven, where do you want to go at the start?
Man, I don't even know where to start. I mean, the movie at the beginning is just packed with so many jokes. That's part of it. Like Birthday Boy Stab Man will be in my head for a long time.
When I was watching the film, the funny thought I had in the back of my head is that all this outside of his apartment is what people who don't live in San Francisco think Market Street and Mission Street are. Yeah,
exactly. I love, like, one of my favorite little throwaway jokes that you and I talked about when we were leaving is, like, there are these posters at the entrance of his, like, very shitty apartment building, and it's, like, band posters for, like, a punk venue or something like that, and the band name is Murder by Fuck. And I just thought that was, like, the most hilarious, like, Matt Stone and Trey Parker type of fake band that they would come up with. Yeah, I love the like fake New York City and all the stabbing and the murdering and how horrifying it is for him to leave the apartment. I love that. I don't.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, like, during the main episode we were talking about, did you feel seen by the by the water after taking the pills thing. I definitely was thinking of that moment. The spot that I felt seen in was when the neighbor kept telling him to turn down his music. Like I'm generally somebody who, like, when I live in apartments, I go out of my way to not make noise. I don't jump on the floor. I don't bang things around. You know, like, I try to be quiet. I have headphones on for like 18 hours a day. I'm like never doing any of that loud because I'm so worried that I don't want to be the person who like annoys like a neighbor. And just the idea that somebody thinks that it's me is my own version of anxiety hell, where I'm like, no, I'm not making any noise. Why do you think it's coming from me? This is crazy.
I feel 100% seen by that too. Joanna is in South Carolina all week, so I've been alone in the apartment, and I still watched everything in headphones all the time because I just have a strong desire to not make any noise that might make any neighbor hate me for a second. Yeah. I will say, in terms of like the Charlie Kaufman connection, that is like the most Charlie Kaufman-y thing in the movie to me. That reminds me so much of like the scene in Anomalisa, where I think it's Anomalisa, where he's saying something and no one can understand his accent, even though he's saying it like perfectly normally and everyone keeps asking him to repeat it. This is like that. It's just this like fear of being misunderstood by other people or having something like blamed on you. I loved all of that. I loved everything about the New York City scene, to the point where there aren't even spoilers I feel like I need to ruin, because it's just like banger after banger after banger. Like, the density of jokes in that sequence is just incredible. It's so funny. I feel like I need to watch it again when it comes out on home video, just so I can like scrub through and see all the little gags and stuff, like the name of all the stores. Like, I know there was one that was like Erection Injection or something like that. Like, every place was just named the most ridiculous thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a film that will you'll get a lot from just going frame by frame in all those scenes in the main part of the city. So if I can jump around a little bit, I just want to get out of the way at the beginning so we can talk about the stuff that's quote real. I want to tell you like the moment that I was starting to wonder if this was Truman Show, because obviously part of the story that goes into the fear, goes into the guilt of his mother, is this idea that like she devoted all of herself to try and protect him as he grew older, and you start to find out that like all these people that are from his life have some sort of connection to his mother. In reality, or, you know, in the reality of the film, it seems like it's just people that are touched by things that her job touches or owns and stuff like that. But in my head, I was like, holy shit, did she engineer an entire world? It's like like, what if his entire life was that poster on the wall of the travel agency in the Truman Show with the lightning going through the plane, and it said it could happen to you? Yep. And like I was like, did she engineer this whole thing just to like helicopter parent her kid and make sure that he wouldn't ever have sex with a person or possibly be hurt by anybody? And I was like, this is fucking insane. And then I was like, okay, that's not what it's doing. But also it let me linger on that thought for like way longer than maybe I should have.
I mean, I think it's like, it isn't doing that, but only because there's no objective reality of the movie. I definitely think there is a hint of that. Like, it is kind of the cosmic Arrested Development, like, and that's why you always leave a note guy, where it's like everything in his life. Because like the reality of the movie, which is all theme, right, is Beau. He is terrified of everything, and he has inherited that terror from his mother, who is a literal like CEO of a bunch of products that are meant to make people more safe. Like, she is like a manifestation of the person who is like, you have to worry about this, you have to worry about that, you have to worry about this, that. And his whole life is completely haunted by her, to the extent that it is 100% informed by her. Like, he lives in an apartment building that she built, and he uses products almost exclusively that she creates, and everything in his life are in the movie kind of touched by her. And the objective reality, I assume, is just that he's a guy who feels like his whole life is devoted to his mom, and yet she still doesn't think it's good enough. Yeah. And that's kind of like the thing that he's playing with. But yeah, it definitely has that bit of a Truman Show feeling.
Well, yeah, I mean, in a way, it's sort of like it's doing like the Idiocracy thing, right? Where like in the future, there is only like there's like one brand of food and then one brand of like appliance, and it's all like these two companies, right? It's like his mother like is, you know, somebody high up in a company that just makes every aspect of our daily life. But it also seems like none of those aspects are particularly good for anybody. They all have their problems, and it's just like a fucked up world that she is like brought forth.
Yeah. Can we? I don't even know where to jump next. I guess I'll jump to one thing that I don't have an answer for yet, which is in the Amy Ryan and Nathan Lane parts of the movie where he's staying in their house. There are a few moments when Amy Ryan is alone with him for a second, and she's desperately trying to tell him something like, don't incriminate yourself, be careful, turn the channel, look at this. And she's trying to tell him that something nefarious is happening. And when he finally turns the channel, he is watching himself, and he is fast forwarding in the future to see all the terrible things that are happening.
Yeah, that was the weird thing that threw me too.
Yeah, like, do we think... I don't think there is a literal reality to that, so it's fine. It's just his, like, his anxiety, again, someone warning him about all the horrible things, like, things are too good to be true right now, so someone has to be telling you, like, don't get too comfortable. But there is a version of that where it is, like, again, the Truman Show, where everyone is in on it and his mom is watching, and his mom is using all of that as proof that he's misbehaving or something. Yeah. And I wasn't quite sure, because she's talking about not incriminating yourself, and then at the end of the movie he's basically on trial for being a horrible person. And so I just didn't know if the movie wanted to connect those things or not.
But is there something too where, like, because obviously he didn't know his father, because his father, well, at least he's told his father died while he was being conceived. in the gnarliest how your father died story I've ever seen in a film. But you know, like, so Nathan Lane is sort of like a father figure who seems to be doing everything nice, but he sort of doesn't trust it. He's trying to escape his mother. He seems to have this recurring like theme of other women who aren't his mother potentially being his salvation from whatever the problem is. There's the young girl on the boat who comes back towards the end of the film. Yeah. And then, you know, in this case, he is trapped in this house with this potential father figure who is sort of seeming to want to keep him here just like his mom does. But then the other woman in the house is like, hey, you need to get out of here. You got to escape. Yeah. I don't know why the daughter doesn't play into that role, other than the fact that, like, you know, she's, you know, going to fall victim to self-harm. Like to me, that is, it's like the White Lotus. It's like the fear of young people that you don't understand and how cruel they must be and how they're laughing at you all the time. I think that's what she is for him. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there is definitely something there. I mean, like, we can talk about the kind of psychosexual aspect of this movie, which is clearly in the heightened story that the movie is telling. He has been taught that having sex will literally kill him, and that it has happened to every other man in his life, and so he needs to be terrified of it all the time. And to me, that is very clearly a sort of like the religious guilt and shame that he was brought up with, and the way that it fucks up his relationships and his ability to form a connection with people. And it is interesting how, like you said, he is once terrified of women because he has all of this, like, repression and guilt. But then because of that, every woman he sees who is remotely nice to him could be his salvation. Like, you could argue the reality of the movie is at the very beginning when Amy Ryan is in that kind of truck helping homeless people, right? She's giving free injections, or maybe it's like she's giving food, or a little bit of everything. I don't know. She kind of seems like she's just like a good person on the street, and now he has imagined this world where he gets to live in their house, and she is like impossibly nice and is looking out for his best interests all the time. So that there's something there. I wish I could interview Ari Aster and learn about his actual sex life to know how much guilt has actually ruined that, because in the movie it's a lot. Well, it's interesting because, like, you know, it's one thing to have this this idea of the fear of sex, like trained into you by your upbringing. Like, it's that dangerous that you could literally die if you climax, right? Like, that is one thing. But the fact that, like, it doesn't seem necessarily like he has been plagued by multiple chances to have sex with somebody and then backed out because of this fear, because he also has the other aspect of this. The first girl that he encountered on this cruise ship said, "Wait for me," and he just decided, "I will." And like, it's almost like he is. It's like maybe this ties back into the thing with the mother, is like a woman tells you to do something and you just obey it, and that's sort of maybe that's tied into that a little bit. Like there's something interesting about like the fact that it's not like this isn't, you know, the 40-year-old virgin or something where he is like just super awkward around women and doesn't know how to interact with them and keeps like weaseling his way out of anything. It's he specifically was like, oh no, this girl when I was 12 said, "Wait for me," and I just figured she would come back one day. but also that
it definitely is the classic of like wanting to like fuck or marry your mom syndrome that I've heard many people talk about before, especially when it comes to like helicopter parents.
Yeah, it is. It is weird. All the shots of her younger, like the quote devotion that she has to him it's definitely not sexualized.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, like the movie makes a point of having her laying in bed with him multiple times and you know, facing him, and they're having pillow talk and everything. And it is very much about this kind of like, which again makes total sense that this movie is blowing up the idea of a like not literally romantic relationship with a mother, but like unhealthy closeness or a level of like dependency, and how that can screw you up. And that definitely seems like this. Like she doesn't want anyone else in his life because they all threaten in some way her own status as number one.
Yeah, I think, too, that cruise is one of the other things that made me think about the Truman Show situation, is because it's literally a self-contained thing, you know, almost like an office building where all these people were there and there just happens to be one other child that's of his age. And she's like, see, there is another child here. Look at that. And it's sort of like felt too convenient with like that setup. But then I also wonder, and Stephen, question for you. Obviously, there's the big reveal at the end. He has sex. He climaxes. He doesn't die. But then she dies. Do you think the mother was also trying to keep her away from men because that was also a thing that was happening in her?
Yeah, I think her mother was doing that. Absolutely. Yeah. That was my read of it too, is she has been living the exact same life as him. But in her case, it's actually real. But then you go back to the Truman Show thing. And again, I can't stress enough, I'm going to be a broken record. I don't think there is a reality of this movie. So there's no such thing as like what really happened. But I do think the fact that it turns out that Elaine, the girl on the cruise, who is now the woman played by Parker Posey, is an employee of his mom's company, is meant to have us at least have this level of anxiety of, oh my God, is my mom involved in this somehow? Yeah. Which, again, the movie doesn't then reveal that she planned it, but it does show her then having been watching the whole time afterwards, which is like the deepest nightmare of that. Yeah. I cannot escape my mother's gaze.
when she's first dead, I did have the thought, is she faking her death just to show her son what could happen? And the fact that she does, but also actually kills somebody who apparently volunteered, like somebody else's life she's ruined. Like that, the sinister, sick, twisted nature of that. Like she was just hanging out in the funeral house, just waiting for him to eventually show up so that she could guilt trip him. But then she waits for him to have sex. It's like, She had to think he was going to die in that moment, right? Like, why would she not burst in and stop? I mean, obviously, like you said...
I mean, I don't think her story is correct, right? I think the truth, and this is where we can wonder how much visual wordplay is involved in the revelation about his dad, because he wants to see his dad, and he finally is allowed to, because he is brought up to the attic, and in the attic is not only his other brother, who I guess existed and has been chained there the whole time, if I'm understanding that correctly.
That's sure what it seems like.
Yeah, but it is also his dad, who is a huge dick. Which, is that the message? Because that's what made me think of Man Seeking Woman. It's like you are literally rendering a concept, and you're doing it in a kind of juvenile way. There's another version where it's like his mom kept his dad's dick chained up in the attic, you know, like, so his mom was controlling. But I feel like the way she plays it, at least, is I'm trying to protect you from the reality that your dad didn't die. Your dad is just a dick. He's like a horrible person.
Yeah.
And I didn't want you to know him because he's so terrible.
Or
and we are literally making a big dick to represent that.
or it could be that, you know, they were saving themselves for marriage, and then as soon as they had sex, he just turned into just a big old hound dog.
Yeah. Dan Savage would call it a testosterone-soaked dick monster, which seems about right. Yeah, whatever it is, like, that would imply that it's like she has become protective of him because she has been wronged, and it's kind of this cycle, which made me think of another movie that you and I both watched at the same time in Theater 5 at Alamo Drafthouse that also doesn't make a good date movie. But we both brought significant others to, which is Men, which is similarly a kind of a director that has had two pretty beloved genre pieces under his belt and then deciding I'm going to go fucking wild this time around. But Men, you know, it is seen through a woman's point of view, so it's a little bit different. But the big reveal, the big visual, oh my God, how far are they going to go, is this litany of men giving birth to other men, each more awful than the one before them, and the idea of like terrible toxic masculinity being passed down through generations.
Yeah.
And a part of me thought about that attic scene, and I was like, these movies have like a little bit of the same thing that they're trying to say. This like nightmare of the masculine thing being passed down.
There's also a bald guy jumping around in the jungle, not the jungle, in the garden outside.
That's true. Yeah. We see full frontal in both movies in a very unsettling way.
So let's talk about the reversal of all this stuff that happens as well. Like when the mother is not just seen as the villain, but it sort of portrays him as potentially the villain of the story. You know, like the entire film, and one might say even previous films, is all about, you know, like what being raised by a parent of this type can do to you and what it puts you through, and like sort of the pain you endure just having to try to please this parent. And by the end, it sort of tries to flip that on its head and go like, you think this has been a pain for you? Like, I have devoted everything to you, so much so that I locked your twin brother in the attic because I only had enough love for one person, and I chose you to be the person that had. There's something super interesting where it's like, it didn't make me feel 100% sympathy for her, but I understood the context of like, yeah, he's been kind of mean to his mom in these movies. All she ever did was love him.
Yeah, and it's the total, again, there are aspects of this here that I assume are like very much tied up with like the Jewish culture in general. Like, it just seems like there's a lot of very specific references. There's even a very funny, I think it's like Steve's Shiva.
Yeah, Shiva
like
Steve's.
a company.
I wish I remembered. There was like a subtitle too that was like, you know, food for your morning or something. Like, I wish
exactly. Yeah, there's something really funny. So there are a lot of little jokes here, and so I don't mean to be like pretending that I know about those specific things, but this broad idea of the parent who is overbearing with love, right? And how do you deal with that? Because they're irritating you, you kind of hate them, and you love them deeply, and you're terrified of hurting their feelings, and all they want is what's best for you, but they're fucking crushing you because of the way they're doing it. And this movie is just literalizing that so much, and that trial at the end is 100% that, where she isn't wrong, but her love of him is a weapon, and she's using it to feel better about it herself. And it's kind of like, like he loves her so much, he will race across the country and risk death 1,000,000 times to try to go to her funeral, like to try to be there. He feels so terrible if he's going to make her upset for even a second. But then he really doesn't want to even like pick up the phone when she calls. And it's like that paradox of like, God, I love you and I'm terrified of you. And I don't know. There's just a lot going on.
That reminds me of I think my favorite joke in the film is when the UPS driver is the one that like answers the phone, and then he's like, dude, I don't know if this is your mom. Here, how about this? How about you hang up and you call back, and we'll see if you call the right number. And then like he answers the phone, he's just, man, I'm sorry.
I just love. See, I started laughing even before that when he's just like, "Oh yeah, you're right. Maybe I dialed the wrong number," and then he's like hanging up, and it says "mom."
Oh man, so good, so good. But yeah, I think too. It comes right before. I mean, it's in the trial. They use the references in the trial, but you kind of see it a little bit before that. Is just, when somebody annoys you. You sometimes you just need to vent and you can get it out, right? Mm-hmm. You can complain about the person, you can talk about the way they make you feel, and then you've gotten it out. Maybe it gets better, maybe it doesn't. But if you are venting to somebody, you always have the implicit trust that you are venting to them and this is secret. The idea that you're going to see a therapist and you're just every day you're like, here's all the problems with my mom, I have to go see her, this is going to suck, blah, 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 blah. And then it turns out that the therapist is on her payroll and also has been sharing every single thing you said and is now going to bring it up in a court of law. I mean, court of law, a court of something.
Yeah.
That was definitely an anxiety moment as well.
Oh, for sure. I mean, again, this whole movie makes so much sense if it's just like the literalization of every anxiety you could ever have.
Yeah.
Speaking of literalizing every anxiety, do you think the very end of this movie, the way this movie ends is Joaquin Phoenix is on his boat and then like it like flips, like catches on fire and flips or something and he's drowning. And in the background, the crowd of people, the audience is leaving, like they're all just walking out. Do you think that was a nod to audiences wanting to walk out of this movie and the fear of people like, nobody even wants to see you drown in your own neuroses? I felt like there was a very meta, self-deprecating thing happening there.
It was 100%, and I love that we sat there for the whole thing until the audience, until both our audience and the audience in the background of that shot were completely gone, and like the guy was trying to clean up, and he was just standing to the side, going like, "I'm gonna go talk to my therapist later about how these two guys wouldn't leave the fucking theater."
Because I like that. That was where I felt like the self-awareness really like rearing its head again. Because it's like the whole movie, you could say the whole movie is Ari Aster putting himself on trial for all the terrible things he's ever thought or ever done. Yeah. And then everyone else is like, I don't want to fucking watch this.
100%.
Yep.
So speaking of the weird, one thing real fast about the dad. It was funny early on in the film. You see a shot of his dad, like a picture of his dad on the wall, but it's kind of blurry and it looks a little bit like he's hammering in a nail. In my head, I thought we were going to find out that the way he died was trying to hang that picture. Like, that shot was taken as he fell backwards and like hit his head or something. But no, it's something both more literal and more metaphorical, is that he has no memory of his father, so the photo itself is blurry. And I was like, okay, I guess Occam's razor applies here.
Which again is where I get a little bit of anomalisa in this movie, because it's like taking an idea and like literalizing it. Like it's kind of the equivalent of everyone looking the same in that movie. Like he doesn't remember this person, so he can't see a face anywhere. But speaking of his dad, and this is probably my last spoilery question, there is a scene in that forest section that you mentioned could be cut. There are things I like in the forest section, but I think I mostly agree with you. The movie would work fine without it. There's this guy who has been watching him for a while, and then they finally start talking. At first he said he was with and cared for his father, and then he seems to say that he is his father, or at least like Beau thinks he's his dad, and then he dies. Do you think that connects to anything, or is that just like another moment of Beau being like, I don't know anything about my life. Anyone I meet could secretly be my dad? Like, I didn't really know how to read that part.
Yeah, I wasn't certain either, especially in the context of finding out that his dad is just a big penis monster. And I was like, what does he mean by take care of? Did he like wash watch the father? Was he like a fluffer?
I think he did something else.
I was just curious I was too confused by that. Though I will say that when you finally see that guy, in my head, he looks a little bit like the guy on the photo that is on the wall, the blurry photo. So I don't know, but also the creepy way he talks about, like, I'm not your father, but I help take care of your father. He's just he's a very interesting fella. And I don't really know what all that is supposed to mean, other than just, maybe one of his fears is that his father's been out there the whole time and he didn't know who he was, but he could have known who he was. But that's also right around the time that he thinks he has 3 sons, which he can't have because he never had sex with a woman.
Yeah. Yeah, that is one that I don't have any kind of answer for what the whole 3-son reveal means, other than, like, even in your wildest fantasies, what you imagine for a future can't be possible because nothing good can ever happen to you. But it seems like that's a long build up to get to an idea that simple.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons why I don't like that section. I'm just like, what the hell am I watching?
Yeah, I hear you. And I forget if I said this or not, but my actual final personal thought is that, look, I laughed in the attic seeing a giant penis monster. Was funny. Wasn't expecting it going in, so it gave me a chuckle. I don't think he went far enough at all. Honestly, that looked... I mentioned Man Seeking Woman before. That looked like the kind of gag that show was pulling off, like, every 30-minute episode, right? Of just like, I'm going to take an idea, I'm going to make it literal, I'm going to blow it up, and then you're going to laugh at how outrageous I got. I think he could have, like, quadrupled down. I wanted him to go full Alex Garland and just, like, make it a litany of horrors for a long time. And I don't know. I'm only mentioning that because I have peeked at some, like, Letterboxd responses to this movie, and at least critics have pointed to that scene as an example of, like, wow, he went out there. No one can say that he didn't go hard. And I'm kind of like, I don't know. It was a little flaccid. I want you to go harder.
I mean, it wasn't that flaccid.
Right, a little bit. Just a little.
So do you think that was also some sort of, like, homage to Enemy as well?
No, that's funny.
Because it definitely, I don't want to fully spoil Enemy for anybody, but
I know exactly what you're talking about from saying that.
Good times.
Wow. Good times. I can't top that.
All right, then I guess we'll just leave it at that. Thanks everybody for listening. Hope you enjoyed. Beau Is Afraid and our discussion of it. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.